Welcome to the Alphagenix Podcast, where every week we talk to incredible guests from around the world of biohacking, well-being, men's health, and more. Here's your host, co-founder of Alphagenix, Ross Tompkins.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome today's guests. We have our very own Dr. Max from Alphagenix and Dr. Adam Hotchkiss from all the way on the other side of the Atlantic. Welcome, Adam. Welcome, Max.
Hey,
hello.
Thanks, guys. It's super excited to be here.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to this conversation. I've been for a while because we obviously met last year in Texas at the Silverback Summit, and actually loved your content, loved the talks that you gave. So I've been waiting for this for a little while. But for anyone who doesn't know who you are, shall we start at the beginning? And who is Dr. Adam Hotchkiss, and how did you get to this situation today?
Yeah, sure. Long story. I feel like a lot of people probably heard a lot of it, so I'll try to summarize as much as possible. But essentially, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird progression that I had. You know, I certainly didn't grow up ever thinking that I was going to be in this position. In fact, oftentimes I joke that if I could have seen myself now when I was like 18, I don't know if I would be like disgusted that I'm some sellout or something, because I was like a punk skater kid. You know, I thought that I was going to be like fight the power, Mohawk or something my whole life. I never thought I'd be clean cut and doctor at all. That's just insane to me to even think of. So I had no interest in science really, or anything to that matter. But I essentially was, you know, like I said, a skater punk kid, and very unhealthy, I guess, just by the nature of that lifestyle. We just didn't really care about things like that. You know, it was like grab an energy drink to get through the day skating, and then all night drinking beer and whiskey and stuff with your friends, listening to punk music and you know, mosh pits and things, and had zero regard for my health. But then an very interesting thing happened where I developed an eating disorder, which is strange because, you know, you would think that demographic of people probably don't care about their physiques at all. But I was, you know, looking up to professional skateboarders and old like UK punk artists. You know, you look at like Sid Vicious or like Dead Boys, you know, they were super skinny because they were on heroin and things, which I shouldn't have idolized them, but I'm like, these guys are so skinny, like you can see their abs and they're wearing their leather jacket. Like I want to look like that. And so I got to this point where I was, you know, essentially kind of starving myself so I could look the look of that, you know, Sid Vicious look or whatever, which is so weird to think about now. But it progressed to a point that got really bad to where, you know, it was like bulimia, and I was, you know, making myself throw up after meals. And this was probably around 19 or so. I was out of high school, just kind of floundering, you know, working dead end jobs, had this weird eating disorder. And I got kind of in trouble with the law, actually, where I was just with friends being stupid. And then I think I put on a sweatshirt or something. And I'm like, you think I could just walk out of this store when nobody would know? And, you know, dare me. Yeah, I bet you could. And then I got caught. And then, you know, that made me take a step back. Luckily, a lot of people would just continue down that path, but I kind of took a step back and said, like, what are you doing with your life, man? And it was kind of interesting. At that time, that movie 300 came out with the Spartans. And, you know, my friends wanted to go see it. I hadn't really ever heard of this. So I started looking into it, and I'm always somebody who gets really interested. Before I'm going to go see a movie that's a true story, I want to read about the true story. I remember reading about the Spartans, and I was so amazed. And I'm like, man, these were true men. Whatever I'm doing, you know, I don't know what I'm doing here. It's a joke. You know, I'm just like, I'm all about me. I'm selfish. It's like my next dopamine hit, the next girl I can hook up with, the next show I can go to. What are you doing? So literally, that day, like I shaved off all my hair. I bought a whole new wardrobe of clothes. It was like 180. I got a tattoo on my wrist that says Etan Epitan, means with it or on it, which is what the Spartans actually used to say when they went to war, which essentially was about their shield. Like, you know, die with your shield, Gloria, or, you know, in fighting, or come back on it, like you died trying. So it was kind of like, you know, they gave everything their all. And I was like, I want to do that with my life. I want to give everything my all. So I got a gym membership, and I, again, kind of do everything 110%. You know, I couldn't just have a skinny physique. I had to develop an eating disorder. I couldn't just work out. I had to like get really into it. And I had to know that everything that I was doing was perfect and to the book. So started teaching myself physiology and biology, anatomy, really loving it. So I signed up at a community college thinking, you know, maybe I'll do some personal training. I got my personal training certificate, and still that wasn't quite enough. I thought maybe I'll be a nurse, and that wasn't quite enough, and kept progressing until I was actually thinking I was going to be a physician assistant, which is a PA, kind of a mid-level is what we call them here in the US, or one step underneath a physician. And I went to go work for a doctor to kind of shadow, and he pulled me aside and said, like, why do you want to, not push yourself all the way? Why don't you want to just become a physician? I think you can. And to me, that was a foreign idea. I thought that to be a physician, that you had to have been bred into it, kind of, raised by physician parents and go to Yale and have go to yacht clubs and things like that. And I'm like, oh, I can't do that. And he told me, he was like, man, I was a surfer until I was 35. And then I was a carpenter for a while. And then I decided to go back to school, and here I am. And so I thought, oh, I can actually do this, even though I have this really weird, like eclectic background. I can do this too. So I just pushed all the way and kind of went into it. It was in that time that I didn't really know what kind of a doctor that I wanted to be. And we have a few different paths here in the US. You can be MD, medical doctor. You could be a DO, a doctor of osteopathic medicine, or you can be a DPM, doctor of podiatric medicine. They all are very similar, and the differences these days are more politics than anything. Some schools are a little harder to get into, and MD is definitely the most prestigious, but like DPM schools are integrated in with MD and DO, so we're literally sitting through all the same classes. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was thinking, what specialty do I like? And I really liked dermatology, because that's who I was shadowing, this doctor. I would get to do a little bit of surgery in the office, but also had to, got to have good relationships with patients. And I also liked orthopedic surgery. And then I met a podiatrist, and he came into the dermatology office. He helped us remove a thumbnail because somebody's thumb needed, some treatment. He's really good at nails. And then he told me I have to go fix an ankle fracture across the street at the OR. And I was like, whoa, you just did dermatology and surgery in the same day. That's exactly what I want to do, because I really wanted to work with athletes and do a little bit of surgery, have a little bit of clinic time. So I went down the road of podiatric medicine, which is foot and ankle surgery, and did my training in reconstructive surgery of the rear foot, so more advanced ankle surgery. And then, like 1 year in, I kind of realized, man, I picked the wrong profession, because I got into this with this love and passion for human optimization, and I really wanted to share with others this beautiful thing that I found in fitness. And I realized that 99% of my day was taking care of wounds, diabetic wounds, from people who were doing the opposite of everything that I was doing, from people who were neglecting their health. And I wasn't seeing them until the damage was done. And I was essentially trying to keep them alive. I said at the Silverback Summit that I would literally see people who would come in with a pre-ulceration. I would tell them, you need to fix your diabetes. And then they wouldn't. They'd come back 6 months later, they'd have an ulceration. 6 months later, we'd have to cut off their toe. 6 months later, their foot. 6 months later, their leg. And then when somebody loses a leg, within 5 years, they have a 50% chance of being dead. So it was like, I just saw this over and over again. And I was kind of bummed out and kind of jaded on my decision really early on, which I felt was sad, because I was so enthusiastic about medicine up until this point. And then weirdest thing ever occurred. I remember this to the, like it was yesterday. I was in the shower, I remember, and I always pick a podcast right before I go in the shower, put it up on the ledge, and I listen, because I like to be learning while I'm in the shower. And I'm listening to Andrew Huberman and Derek from More Plates, More Dates talk. And Derek had just come out with this clinic called Merrick. And I remember thinking, man, I wish I could just go back and maybe do the MD route, and I would just do general physician. And then I could have gone and worked with Derek. And man, I wish I could have had that chance. And then he wrote me that night, insane. I was literally thinking about him. The next morning I wake up and I have a voice memo from Derek. Him and I weren't friends before this. He didn't follow me. I don't even think I followed him. And I'm like, More Plates, More Dates. I know this guy. That's a podcast dude. And he's really big on YouTube. Why is he talking to me? And he's like, I remember, hey, dude, we got this thing at Merrick. Would you like to come on? And because he knew, I had been posting some things about TRT and hormone optimization, because I went down that path of using a lot of anabolics in my bodybuilding phase, and then kind of integrating my medical knowledge. And I was like, absolutely, sign me up. I'll start now. And the rest is history. So I've really just committed my entire life to trying to prevent people from being on that side of medicine, to where we are just, reactive. I want to do preventative, truly optimized medicine. And I have a unique perspective in that, because I've done it. I've been to the extreme of being more than optimal as the enhanced bodybuilder, using a lot of pharmacology, sometimes to the detriment and unhealthy too. But I know that physiology and those pathways very, very well. And then I know the medical stuff and how to prevent the diseases that I was seeing. So I've kind of just been able to merge them together, which is really awesome. Said I was going to keep that brief, and it wasn't brief at all.
I love that. I love the journey you've been on. And I think the fact that you've gone through that whole journey, including, as you mentioned there, with the performance enhancement in the middle, the enhanced bodybuilder, gives you kind of a unique perspective, I guess, when you're then talking to men who have self-medicated before. Because I guess, well, it's bigger than I think a lot of people probably realize, isn't it? Do you know how many men in the US have used steroids before?
I don't know the statistics, but I know my good friend Rick Collins, an attorney who is in this space, he quotes it sometimes, and it's a very, very, very large number. And most of it is very recreational and just, average dudes that are going to the gym trying to have a little bit better biceps. So it's very big. I don't know the exact number, but more than most people would think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the UK, it's 1 million they've theorized or come up with that number, and our population is, of course, a lot smaller than yours.
Yeah, so I'm sure it's, you can take the size and distribute it over, and it's going to be a large amount of US citizens using.
Yeah, absolutely. Why do you think the reason is for that? Like, why do you think many men go down that route?
Yeah, I think it's multifactorial. I think there's a lot of reasons. One thing that I focused on in my undergrad, I did a dual degree. One was in chemistry just to meet the pre-med requirements, and the other was in sociology for my own interest. And I did my research in sociology on male body image because I was coming from that, past of having an eating disorder and so obsessed with the way that I looked, and I wanted to dive into that. And I did a lot of interview style. And what I found was the same exact story that women say that, oh, I grew up looking at the magazines and this was, put on to me that I had to look a certain way. The men were saying the exact same things. Like, it was to the T. I grew up watching cartoons, Dragon Ball Z, Superman, whatever. And, we've seen that when they actually make the human look like it does in the common books, that it's anatomically impossible. It's these guys are bigger than the largest Mr. Olympia. They are so big. And that's what us boys from a young age are looking at. And, we have this thought that if you're not big and muscular, you're less of a man. And to be a man is really to command respect and to take up space. Men do this kind of stuff subconsciously. Men sit down and take up as much space as they can. They open up their legs. They want to show that they take up a large amount of space. It's probably evolutionary, but then we've had the societal kind of impacts imparted on us too. And then we learn that, there's no way we're going to get anywhere close to our idols if we just do this naturally. And, I think it's also human nature to want the quickest, easiest route. And we think, it's just on the other side of a few injections, which most men are, we'll find out it's not that easy, but that's what we think at first. And, we start injecting and hoping to turn into our superhero heroes.
Yeah. Do you think it's accelerating then, because a few decades ago, maybe there was a few magazines to look at, and now because of the internet, like social media, do you think young men are under more pressure?
Absolutely. Definitely more pressure, and then it's more accepted, which is a weird thing, because when I first started in bodybuilding, it was probably 2008 or so. People like Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, they were winning the Olympia then, and they were larger than life. And of course they were on steroids, but honestly, God honest truth, people have said, yeah, right, when I brought this up, but I literally did not know if people like Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler were on steroids because no one talked about it. You had to go really deep into the internet, into the deep, dark recesses of forums to find steroid forums where people were actually open about this stuff. But in no video was somebody like Jay Cutler ever talking about what cycle he was on or how much he was doing. Fast forward to today, there's not one pro who isn't super open with what they're doing. And, it's a double-edged sword, because on one end, now we have like realistic expectations that, I can't just look like that if I buy Cell Tech or, whatever other company's protein, even though they're promising that I'm going to look like Jay Cutler after one scoop. And that's a positive. But the con is that everybody sees that everybody else is doing it, and young kids are starting very early. And now we have these younger influencers who are growing their entire platform off of their use. They're doing trend challenges and things like that. And the kids have barely even lifted, a month natural, and they're going straight to the strongest anabolic there is. So again, double-edged sword. I don't know. I mean, I love the honesty. I really like that people are open about it, but it's also kind of dangerous.
I was going to say the same thing. It is a tough balance, because half the time you think, well, is it benefiting guys because at least they kind of know maybe safe use? Because a lot of people talk about safer use, don't they? And they talk about, don't do this stupid thing like I did 10 years ago. But then there is the other side to that, which is almost like talking about it brings it out into people's knowledge, their field. So they start thinking, oh, he looks big, so maybe I should try a bit of this, that, or the other. So it's a bit of a hard balance to strike. I didn't know those big bodybuilders were on steroids when I was younger. I was very naive, I think. I was just thinking,
same.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, they must train better than me. They must have better supplements than me. Oh, it's because they're doing this exercise routine that I've never heard of. And I got to do dog crap training, or, the F7 or whatever it was called. That's what is making them that way. And if I just do this, then I'll be like that. And then that's one thing that I really try to get out in all of my content, is because I've been there and I've done copious amounts of drugs. Like, I was pretty stupid with my use sometimes, and I never turned into those guys. And there's multiple reasons for that. Like I said, you're not just your goal physique is not on the other end of an injection. It's on the other end of years of, one, picking the right parents, having really good genetics. That's probably the biggest one. And then two, the work that they put in the kitchen, the amount of food that they eat is just, astronomical. And most guys don't get that figured out. And then three, perfect training day in and day out. Regardless of their motivation, regardless of their desire, they're in their training harder than any of us have ever imagined training, but every single day. And then they turn out like that. And the steroids are just like, the cherry on top that kind of help them. But we get it, screwed up. We think it's all steroids. 99% of it is steroids. 1% is a diet, training, and genetics. And I've tried to impart on people like, hey, I thought that way. I did a lot of steroids and I barely looked like I lifted sometimes. I looked like a fit guy at the gym. Sure. People looked at me and said, that guy works out, but in no way were they like, wow, that guy's going to be the next Chris Bumstead. And it was funny because when I got the biggest, I got up to 245 pounds, pretty lean. I was on the least amount of drugs ever. I was on, like a small amount of testosterone, a little bit of nandrolone, and I would take Anadrol like 3 or 4 times a week before my workouts, which is a very small cycle for most bodybuilders. But I dialed in my eating more than ever before. I was eating to the point of wanting to throw up like every 3 hours, and I hated it. And I did that consistently for a year, and I blew up and got huge. And I'm like, I realized at that point, man, I just wasted the past like 5 or 7 years doing all kinds of anabolics when I should have just figured out training and diet from the get-go. And I probably wouldn't even needed drugs up until this point. So I try to kind of impart that on a lot of the younger guys that, figure out the hard stuff, the diet and the training and the sleep and the recovery, the supplementation, figure all that out first, because that is the building block. That's 98, 99%. And then you can add some anabolics in maybe if you need.
That was a huge factor for me, is just simply trying to put on muscle over the last year, 2 years, is I don't eat enough. I'm a fairly big guy, but if I realized that if I stuff my face, then I will put on muscle. But frankly, I don't really want to put in the effort into actually regularly eating large volumes of food, which people don't realize. To put on the mass, you've got to actually feed the body a significant amount of calories. That's why these guys are on 5,000 calories plus a day to maintain and build on that mass. It's crazy.
And it's not a lot of young guys will come to me and tell me, I can't put on weight. And I'm like, well, what are you eating? And oftentimes they can't, really tell me. And then they'll say something like, oh, 5,000. I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to need to see a food log, and document yourself weighing it. Like, I want to see every meal, take a picture of it, show me that it's done. I want it, because you're probably not actually eating 5,000 calories. And if you were, you would probably be a lot bigger. I did a podcast with Justin Harris, an IFBB kind of pro coach, and he gave the analogy of, I think he said, steroids are like the workers at the construction site. You can, put all these workers in, but the wood, the hardware, the foundation, all of that is the food. And without, all of the food, without the materials for the house, you can have all the workers there and they're just going to be sitting around, but they have nothing to build that house. And that's 100% true. So a lot of guys fill themselves up with all these anabolics. They have these workers there, but they have no, food to build the muscle. And you can't defy the laws of physics. You can't, make matter out of nothing. So you need to fill yourself with calories.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess as you've got to put the work in as well. You can't just inject yourself with something, eat a few more calories, and go to the gym once a week. It's not going to happen.
That's very true too. And then to, more for like your audience, probably not a lot of guys in here, I hope, that are all geared out, but probably a lot that are very interested in TRT just to be a little bit better than their average guy, to be their best, to have, some visible abs and to look decent when they're on holiday, et cetera. These guys too are like, oh, TRT is the answer. I just need to do a little bit of TRT and then my gut is going to go away and I'm going to feel great and I'm going to look great. And that's not true. I even, my last consult yesterday, I remember I did the whole thing. And at the end, he asked me one last question, like, so when should like my fat start turning into muscle? And I'm like, whoa. Like, it's not going to. And he was sitting on the couch. I said, if we give you TRT and you keep sitting right there like you are now, nothing is going to happen. And some people will push back against that. There was one study where they, gave, I think it was 600 milligrams of testosterone, and they didn't have them do any work, and they put on a little bit of muscle. Sure, but that's a little bit of muscle. They certainly did not turn into, somebody's goal physique. So you need to do the work. Our mutual friend Dave Lee often says TRT gives you the results that you deserve, and I love that. I use it every single day, because where TRT can benefit your average man, if he is low, is if he's doing everything right and he's figured out the nutrition, he's figured out the training, he's figured out the recovery, and he's hitting a wall and he's not getting results, and he's, you can be disheartened by that for sure. At that point, if you give somebody like that who's doing everything right, who's checked off every box, you give them TRT, they start to realize all of the things that, they've been working towards. But it certainly does not do the work for you ever. All of us, we've experienced TRT ourselves, and I have an interesting, perspective in that I've had, TRT times 10. I've had my testosterone levels up at like 5,000. And again, I didn't really get the results that I wanted because I wasn't putting in the work that I needed to get those results.
Yeah.
What made you switch down from, when was the moment where you were on the sort of cycles and things like that, and then you decided, actually, I'm going to go for TRT, and now you sort of expertise in the longevity space? Was there a moment, or was it just an awakening at some point? Or
yeah, there was kind of a moment, or a conglomeration of a few moments all put together. One was that I was just telling my friend this yesterday. I remember specifically being about 240 pounds. Victoria, my wife, and I went on a walk around the block. And I remember halfway through just being uncomfortable as hell. I was sweating like a pig. Wasn't even that hot out. I was out of breath, and we were on a slow stroll around the block. And my thighs were chafing. I'm starting to get a rash because my thighs were so big. They're rubbing against each other. And I just felt like a fat, obese guy. And I'm like, what the heck good is all this muscle and everything? Like, this isn't fitness. What am I doing? This is really stupid. I remember thinking that. I can't even go on a walk around the block. But the one thing that really scared me the most is I definitely got to a point where I felt like I was having some cognitive decline. I was at a loss for words often. I had a lot of brain fog, and maybe this was related to, COVID and things too. But I definitely got to a point where I had a significant amount of brain fog. I was at a loss for words. My verbal fluency was significantly declined. And that really scared me because I felt like as a doctor, I shouldn't let my brain be declining at 33 years old or whatever I was. This isn't good. I don't even remember half the stuff that I learned, or at least I felt like I remembered, but I wasn't able to articulate it. I couldn't have this conversation without a lot of ums and stuttering and being stuck. So I just thought, this is so stupid. I think that these steroids are causing some neurodegeneration early on. I started diving into the literature, and there it is. I mean, it's very evident that high androgens cause, significant amounts of neurodegeneration. So I'm just like, what am I doing all this for? I'm never going to be, Mr. Olympia. I'm not getting paid for my physique. Like, it's just so stupid. Why am I doing this at this point? And I, also had the shift to where I was becoming more of, I guess, a mature man, and just, wanting to take care of my family and be there long term. And, I just thought, okay, let's switch and get way more, put my 110 mentality into longevity and go down that road, which is kind of where I've been for probably the past 3 years or so.
Love that. If we consider longevity angle, then we know that there is an increase in health span with good musculature. There's that correlation, isn't there, between the size of your muscle, the largest organ, and the length of your health span. So I'm not sure if either of you as doctors will be able to answer this, but do you think there is ever a safe level of performance enhancement that can be used to improve someone's health span? Like, would that reduce would it reduce the amount of people going to the hospital and that strain that's put onto the health services all over the world?
Well, I think even, TRT for some men is probably in the realm of performance enhancing, even though here in the US, we certainly can't document that. That would be illegal for us to ever prescribe for performance, which, just side tangents, it's absolutely absurd to me that we literally have written into our licenses that we can't prescribe testosterone to make people reduce fat and build muscle. Two things that, as you just pointed out, lead to better, healthier lives. We can't do that. That's illegal. So, but back to the point, I think that I would argue that, a man who's, say, 50, who maybe naturally without TRT would maybe have a 300 or below, if we bring them now to a 500, 600, 700 nanogram per deciliter, and I'm sorry, I don't know the equivalent units in the UK, but that would be higher end of normal. If we're bringing that man there, I would say in a way that is performance enhancing. I definitely think they have the ability for more protein accrual or muscle gaining at that higher level. Also, they're not having a fluctuating, undulating testosterone level. They're having a steady stream. So that also in a way is a performance enhancing. So I think just TRT is probably the safest way, because if we can bring somebody up to where we know a healthy body could naturally produce up at the upper end, maybe here in the US, say 1,000 or 1,200 nanograms per deciliter. I've seen some very healthy young men come in with that level. So if we can bring them up to that, and they are also healthy enough to tolerate it, which is a very important thing. Are they insulin sensitive enough? Do they have low enough inflammation? Is their body fat low enough? I think that we can definitely aid them in putting on muscle to help with their longevity. And I also don't think that the muscle needed for longevity is bodybuilder muscle. I think it's just having some strength, strength to do, 10, 20 push-ups, maybe a few pull-ups. Basically, you need the kind of strength that if you're going to trip off a curb when you're 75 years old, that you don't break your hip, that you're able to catch yourself and get back up and keep walking. Because, outside of the things like heart disease and cancer, we have accidents like, breaking hips. Somebody breaks their hip at 75 years old, their chance for mortality increases significantly. And so if you can just build a little bit of muscle, probably not even things that you can, noticeably see, probably nobody thinks that you're a gym bro, but just enough to be able to push yourself up off the ground, that's going to be huge.
Yeah, I love that. And going back to my sort of physio days, the kind of work we used to put into older gentlemen and ladies when they'd fallen and then mobility was starting to decline. And as you say, that often did lead on to a steep decline and then even death. So avoiding that is huge.
Absolutely.
What are the you mentioned there a couple of things about tolerating the testosterone. You mentioned sort of insulin resistance and things like that. They're kind of classic scenarios where you see guys almost like troubleshooting on TRT, sort of recurring themes of issues that guys will come across when they're not maybe tolerating increases in testosterone levels. Dave, like you mentioned, Dave Lee always talks about the TRT works with you, not for you. So you've got to kind of put in the work and not expect the results just from the end of the needle. What do you commonly see over there in working for Marek, where guys will trip up or common issues?
Yeah, I love that point that Dave has really brought to the forefront, and it's something that I think it makes sense when you say it out loud, but it doesn't really, just come to our minds. We don't think that. How do I put it? The way that Dave puts it, I really like. I think it's really elegant, which is essentially, he says, if your body is, naturally suppressing your testosterone, which we see, if somebody is insulin resistant, if somebody is highly inflamed, we do know that the body lowers its levels of testosterone. So, it doesn't take a PhD in biochemistry to go, maybe the body is smart and realizes that that is not a good state of health for high levels of testosterone. And as soon as we add those high levels into that state, to that inflamed insulin resistant state, we're probably going to get some side effects. And that's usually, we can get into the science of it, but really just at a layman's terms right there, it makes sense. You go, oh yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And I try to, tell guys that, and they go, then they start working on their health. But things that we'll see is, the increase in red blood cell count, and insulin can, hyperinsulinemia or insulin resistance can definitely drive up red blood cell count and hematocrit. And I kind of fall on the side of, we shouldn't have extremely elevated red blood cell count and hematocrit and hemoglobin. I do think it does increase risk of somewhat to clotting potentially, and potentially stroke, especially in an unhealthy individual like that. We can get into the donations and things. I don't routinely recommend over donating, but I'm not on the side of just let it get as high as possible. That's one thing. We also see things like gynecomastia. We see insomnia, irritability. All of these things can come up when people aren't healthy enough to have those levels. Conversely, if you have a very healthy guy who's very insulin sensitive, he has low inflammation, he has low amount of body fat, good amount of muscle, they can tolerate much higher doses and feel a lot better at higher doses. But everybody always thinks more is better, and that's not always the case. If you bring an obese, insulin-resistant, highly inflamed guy up to that 1,200 nanograms per deciliter, they're going to be riddled with side effects. I'm sure of it. They're probably going to get acne, palpitations. They're going to be hot. They're going to be insomniacs. Their red blood cell count's going to increase. Their lipids are going to increase. So, you maybe sometimes need to start those guys lower. Or like our mutual friend, Ali Gilbert says, make them healthy enough first before TRT. And she coined it GPP for TRT, where she actually tells guys like, no, you can't get it yet. And I love that. I often wish that I could, though I'm sometimes limited. And you probably feel the same way, Max, is you might only see these guys once every 3 months for myself. And I would love to just tell them, go get fit and I'll see you in 3 months. But I'm sympathetic to the fact that sometimes these guys are in a spot where they've been derailed so far off, that now they are insulin resistant, obese, in pain, and to tell them go get fit and come back is really hard. Now, Ali has the ability to actually work one-on-one with them, which I love. So I'll often, punt them off to Ali, but sometimes I do meet them somewhere in the middle and say, we can do this, but we concurrently need to get you very fit, because without that, we're not going to get the results. And unfortunately, some guys listen, some guys don't. And the ones who listen, sell one yesterday. I was so proud of the guy. Man, it was awesome. He was actually diabetic, an A1C of above 7. He came back and his A1C was 5.2. His lipids, like he had an LDL-C of like 160 before. It was like 80. Like there was not one thing on his labs that was out of range. It was beautiful. Everything was perfect. And he made it through the holidays, everything. He did so well. He did not fall off, and he was feeling great, and he was expressing his gratitude. I was expressing my gratitude because it was just so cool to see. It was really awesome. But then, I've definitely seen the guys who don't change anything. We often recommend, the way that it kind of works at Merrick is they meet with the coaches and things, and we recommend a lot of possible things that they can do. And at the end of the day, they have the autonomy to move forward with the things that they want. And oftentimes what you see is we'll recommend, lipid lowering agents and metabolic agents and, all of these things. And all they pick is testosterone. And I always know when all they picked was testosterone, because the only thing that changed was the testosterone went from 300. Now it's up to 800, and everything else got worse. And I'm like, oh, my goodness. And it really upsets me when like vitamin D didn't even get better. I'm like, you mean to tell me you couldn't even take a vitamin D pill a day? Like, come on. Like, and that happens a lot. And they usually don't feel good. Usually they're saying, oh, I don't know. I haven't really noticed much. I'm like, yeah, because I tried to tell you it wasn't the panacea that you hoped it would be. Now let's send you over to Ali and get you fit.
Yeah.
It is hard. I was just going to say, it's a hard balance to strike, because you often wonder how much. So say someone's got a poor lifestyle, they have low testosterone, then how much will the testosterone aid them in getting more driven, more sort of energy, more drive to go to the gym, all of that stuff. So it's a very hard balance to strike, isn't it? I can certainly see where Ali sits on that, which is get fit as much as possible before you go on the TRT. And then there might be this middle ground where there's guys there who will use the TRT to start the right journey. And so it's,
Absolutely.
and you don't have a crystal ball, so you can't predict where they are. Because testosterone is a funny one. I always say this, it's a vicious cycle, because what causes your testosterone to be reduced, i.e. fat, lack of exercise, all of these things, poor micronutrition. Low testosterone also leads to worse decisions, more fat, more insulin resistance. So it's a vicious cycle. It's a very weird way the body works, where it punishes you further from the initial issue. So it can be a really hard one to try and work out. And that's why I think, like you said about at Marek Health, and what we try and do is support and sort of educate and guide. But then, like you said, everyone's got their autonomy. At the end of the day, they've got to make their decisions day to day, because we can't be there every single minute of every day making the right decision for them.
Yeah. I think, as you say there, sometimes TNT can interject, break that downward spiral and help them spiral back up. But then they still have to make those choices around diet, nutrition, exercise, sleep, mental health, protecting the mental health, whether that's with meditation or whatever it might be. And all of those things become more and more important, but arguably they're easier because the TRT was started.
Yeah, and I love, that's where again that term from Dave comes, that TRT will give you the results you deserve 100%, because you need to do the work to be able to yield the results, and without that you're not going to get anything. So if you changed nothing, if you just continue to sit on the couch and watch TV, you're going to get the results that sitting on the couch and watching TV gave you. Now, conversely, if you go put in all the work, you'll finally start to realize those results. So that's so important for guys to realize, because unfortunately, the way that I think that we advertise these days when it comes to TRT is that it's going to fix everything for you, And also, I think advertising inappropriately convinces a lot of men that they need testosterone when they may not. Something that I really like to harp on is, like I said earlier, more is not always better. We have basically zero data to say that when somebody is in a normal physiologic range, that say, a 500 is worse than 1,000. We don't have any data that says that whatsoever. And it's very nuanced. And you need to work with somebody who understands, what they're looking for. But, I've seen guys who literally have maybe a 300 testosterone, which is very low. Again, sorry, but I don't know the conversions. But 300 would be on the very end, the very low bottom of the US scale. Mm-hmm. And they feel great. They're putting on awesome amounts of muscle. They have great libido. They're feeling good. So why the heck would that guy need testosterone? There's other things at play here. There's androgen receptor sensitivity. There's transcription factors, these genetic things that maybe this individual has more of than the other doesn't. There was a really good study done where they looked at the effect of androgen receptors on the response to testosterone. They essentially took guys who had high levels of serum testosterone and a low density amount of androgen receptors, and they put them up against guys with low serum testosterone, high androgen receptors. The high androgen receptor side responded better to testosterone. They had better results. They, had less subjective symptoms of low T, and they had better hypertrophy. So that tells us right away the number of testosterone really doesn't matter. And unfortunately, we can't measure things like your androgen receptor density and content. We're not doing muscle biopsies and looking. We also, don't know if maybe all of your androgen receptors are saturated, meaning, if all of them are saturated at 400, if you have 800 in there, that extra 400 is just going to wreak havoc and cause issues. So we can't know that. And that's where guys get in trouble, because, the TV or the ads tell them, oh, are you tired at the end of the day? Which every man is. Oh yeah, I'm tired. Do you not have the physique that you love? All of us want to look better. And oh, you have low testosterone. Then they go in and just get a script for testosterone when we don't even know that that's the problem, So that's why I like to tell guys, check off every single box first and be honest with yourself, because when guys tell me they're doing everything right, I know they're probably not doing everything right. I don't know if you guys ever saw, there was a TV show here in the US in like the 80s and 90s. I think it was called Maury. It would essentially, he would come out with a lie detector, because they'd say like, that's not my child. And then he'd come out and say, the lie detector says that is your child, you're lying or whatever. It was a drama show. But I kind of tell people that, like, they're telling me I'm doing everything right. My diet's good. I'm sleeping good. I'm exercising. I'm like, the labs tell me you're lying. You're pre-diabetic. Your lipids are sky high. So unless you've actually checked off all the boxes, I don't think we even should be talking about testosterone yet. You feel like crap because you're living like crap. And exercising isn't going to the gym and sitting on the machine and scrolling through Instagram, and every 15 minutes you do a set and check out the chick and go back on Instagram. Like, that's not exercising. Go sign up with Allie and do her program and do all the work first. And if you still don't feel good after 3 months of getting good sleep, getting good sunlight, working on your relationships, working on your spiritual health, eating nutritious foods, etc. If you still don't feel good, let's have that conversation about testosterone. But, too many guys these days are jumping straight to the testosterone side of the equation, in my opinion.
Well, you said, I remember seeing, I can't remember where I saw it, whether it was online or not, but you said if thyroid was sexy, we would see more advertisements for it. So it's kind of like, and often the symptoms of low T and hypothyroidism are, very much crossover. Whereas if thyroid was seen as a sexy hormone, then we'd have that advertised. There'd be little clinics all over the place selling thyroid medication. It'd be a very different story. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Because here in the US, and I'm not sure the legality there, but testosterone is a controlled substance, putting it right next to things like heroin and fentanyl. And so you think like, ooh, like, I can go get this really hardcore controlled substance that's going to turn me into Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, but it's not, unfortunately, but because of the control status, because of the taboo around it, because of all the propaganda the government put out about it, turning, athletes into these things, like, we do feel like it's sexy and it's going to be beneficial when, most people, when they use it, they don't get a lot out of it. They're kind of let down because they're expecting that. Again, you're going to get the results you deserve, nothing more. And oftentimes you could get the results you deserve without it too, if you actually put in the work.
How much of a change did you see, Adam, when you went down to TRT physically yourself? I mean, if you imagine you were doing all the same things, I don't know if your training and your life changed at the same time, but did you see a lot of mass loss, or was it a case that you started eating less, or how much do you think you could maintain?
Yeah, that's interesting. So that was part of, I think, like I earlier mentioned, my eating disorder, I think, played into the steroids, definitely, for sure. I think there was a lot of carryover there, and it was definitely just a body image thing. And, I went on steroids, and basically you're supposed to do like a blasting cruise, where you do a high amount of steroids for, 12, 16 weeks, and then come down for maybe 30 weeks out of TRT. And I never did that. I pretty much just blasted for years because I was so internally afraid that if I lowered my dose at all, that I was going to lose everything. And when I finally got over that, a few years back and just said, screw it. Like, I drew a line in the sand. I'm never going to do high doses again. And I went straight to 120. I actually didn't notice that much. If anything, I felt a lot better, to be honest. I didn't realize that I wasn't feeling as good as I thought. I started sleeping significantly better. I used to have the worst sleep ever because androgens will just screw up your sleep. I used to, maybe sleep 2 hours at most and wake up wide awake in a pool of sweat and then go eat a ton of food, and that like insulin coma would be able to put me back to sleep for another few hours, and that cycle would repeat. Didn't get any good sleep. Now I can finally sleep 8 hours, pretty easily. My mood was weird. I did a lot of risk taking behavior. Like, I was just kind of an asshole too, and didn't even realize it, especially in like relationships and things. I didn't take other people's feelings into account. I was very self-centered when I was on it. And I feel so much better without it. But to the physical changes, I actually, I put out a workout video today that'll come out in a few hours and kind of talked about this, where I've dropped down to only like 2 workouts a week because I'm so busy with my entrepreneurial side of things and working with Merrick. Like, I hardly have any time to work out, which I'm trying to improve, but I'm basically down to 2 workouts a week. And I would say I still look, better than 99% of the population. When I walk in a room, people definitely notice like that's a muscular guy who probably puts a lot of work into his physique. I really don't. Alex Hormozi has talked about like having basically passive income on a physique that he built years past. He put a lot of work into it like I did. And I've been able to kind of just ride that train. I have lost weight for sure. I've lost about 20 or 30 pounds, but I also eat a lot less. I train a lot less. I honestly think, I would have been able to maintain a significant amount of mass. And a prime example of that is Vigorous Steve. If you guys familiar with Steve, yeah. So for your listeners, he has been natural now for over 6 months or so, I believe, because he's trying to conceive. And so he's only on a fertility protocol using HCG. His testosterone's only, in the normal range. And this is a guy who's been doing high amounts of steroids for years. And I was just in person with him a few months back, and he's huge. Like, his biceps are the size of my head still. He's not losing any weight. He says he is. And his own, his body dysmorphia head that all of us bodybuilders have, he feels small. But everybody looks at him and goes, wow, that guy's massive. And he's been able to maintain a lot of weight just on TRT. So, you don't need those super high levels of androgens to maintain a lot of mass. Even people like Jay Cutler, I don't think he's lying. He probably wants to live longer too and doesn't do high amounts of steroids. And that guy, how old is he now? Over 50? Freaking awesome physique. Like, he still looks huge. Of course, he's deflated in areas, and some saggy skin because he was so much bigger. But most of us would never be able to ever hit his post-steroid physique that he has now. He's still a monster and looks amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned a couple of things today, and you did on your talks as well last year about the spiritual aspect of health as well. And I think it's amazing that you talk about that, because a lot of people, especially in this world, don't. It's about, having this injection and then you're going to feel great. And we know the foundations, as we mentioned, are what you're putting into your body. So your diet, your exercise, but we also put things into this end as well, don't we? And you could say that's, whether it's the news and the propaganda that you're watching, or that spiritual component as well. So what's your view on that?
Yeah, this is an interesting one for me, and one that I'm currently working on for sure, because I see the utility in it. I see the benefits of people who are spiritually fulfilled. And it's something that I don't know if I really am. I've struggled with it a lot because I grew up in a very, very religious and spiritual and religious household. We were we were in a very strict sect of Christianity called Seventh-day Adventists. So, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's very similar to like Mormonism and things like, it's almost cult-like, and they have such extreme views on things. Like I couldn't play sports, and, we kept the Sabbath, like Jewish people do. So at the end of Friday night, lights out, no TV, no video games. And then it remained that way where all you could do is read the Bible until Saturday night, the entire Sabbath. And I just had a lot of resentment growing up like that, because I was always embarrassed to bring kids to my house because they'd have to hear about the Sabbath and Christianity and things. And, I'm very grateful for the way that I grew up, because it was kind of uncomfortable. And I'm so happy my parents didn't give me a comfortable upbringing. I'm glad that I was made to do things that I, didn't want to do, even though I don't necessarily agree with it now. But for the longest time, I had a lot of resentment because, I kept, as a kid, I definitely even had a scientific mind where I'd always ask why, well, the Bible keeps saying, that God talked to this person and talked to this person. Like, I'm asking this guy to talk to me every night and he's not talking to me. Why did he just go silent? Or, why are these kids dying? How many kids die every, second of diseases that supposedly this all powerful thing could just change and doesn't. So I kind of got really pissed off at the whole idea of Christianity. And that kind of made me put a wall up against spirituality in a way too. But then I just kind of kept going through life and realized that I do think that humans, they have the physiological standpoint, how cells are interacting and things. We have the emotional one, how things are making us feel. And then we have this interesting spiritual thing. There's no denying, whether you're an atheist or not, that there is a good and evil. And I know like philosophers can debate about this, but we know when things are good and we know when things are bad. There's just an inherent, belief there. And that kind of told me like, there's something deeper here. And I don't necessarily need to believe in an almighty, creator to be spiritual. And I started realizing that I can find spirituality in a lot of things, which was very fulfilling for me, because I still am very, science minded. I want to know why, and I want to be able to touch things and taste them and smell them and study them and replicate them, which spirituality is hard because a lot of times you can't. Though I found that even conversations like this between, you guys, I have a huge affinity for you guys. I really like you, and you fulfill me talking to you. We would have breakfast together at the Silverback Summit, and I'd walk away from there feeling fulfilled. And like, those were really nice people. I fed off your energy. We had, mutual things in common. And that was a spiritual event to me, and I started realizing like, I can find spiritual fulfillment in a lot of things. It doesn't need to be, devoting myself to a religion that I don't necessarily believe in. So a lot of things, a lot of things can fulfill us spiritually. Relationships are a big one for me. The fact that I'm, putting somebody else before me is huge. And I really think that is, spirituality as a whole. Knowing that we are part of something bigger, whether that be your family and, that you're the head of your household and you're taking care of other people and other people rely on you. Like that can be a spiritual event if you kind of look at it that way, So I've kind of been working on that myself. And I do think that it's something that more men should kind of look into and at least, try to fulfill that, because without it, you can feel kind of empty in a way.
Yeah, I was going to say, even like, the sort of, not to go too religious, but even the Bible stories have incredibly insightful moral, or at least sort of behavioral guidelines, which at the end of the day is about, taking responsibility, speaking honestly, looking after your family, being loving, being caring, which I think is like what you're getting at as well, as you don't necessarily need to have the image of a God, but actually having a purpose and drive, but also having a social network. All of these things can have sort of like a spiritual element to them. And I think sometimes without that, there's a lot of lacking, there's a lot of, you can feel quite empty. I think if you do end up focusing too much as well on the physical side of life without looking at the rest of the whole circle, I guess.
Yeah. I can just, exactly. You kind of feel empty, if you just chalk everything up to, oh, that's just a chemical reaction. That's why I feel that warmth in my chest when I think about that person, maybe it is, maybe it's all chaotic, and maybe we're just, on a rock floating through space and it's just chaos. Who knows? But it definitely, I think there is something in us humans that makes us feel a lot better to kind of believe in something greater than us, and that's why all those ancient works were done, the Bible, and they're very insightful. And a lot of them say the exact same thing, which is interesting. So is that just human nature to repeat the same things over and over again? Is there something inherent in us that comes to the same conclusions, or is there an underlying thing, and a lot of these principles that the various religions teach, they work very well. So, unfortunately, we're getting more and more secular, which I always thought would be a great thing. But the more secular we get, our society seems to be degrading. And I look back to, the more conservative ways that had a lot more religious or spiritual influence, and they thrived because of that, because, there was these moral foundations that humans work really well on. So even if it's all made up, it works. There was a really good like South Park episode actually where they were doing it on the Mormons, and the creators of South Park were Mormon, and they have really good insight, but they kind of debunked the whole religion throughout the entire episode. But then at the end, the little kid says like, maybe our whole thing is made up, and we're, we know that it's all fake, but we're really good people. And, we're the nicest people you ever met. And he went over all the benefits, and everybody's like, that's true. Like, who cares if you have some crazy stories? It's really helped you. And I actually had a good friend leave the church as well. When we were in school, he left Mormonism. And he had basically told me, like, I realize, or I believe now that part of that stuff is like fake, and I don't believe in the church anymore. But everything that I learned there about family and about, morals and everything, I'm going to impart that onto my son. I'm basically going to give him the same upbringing without reading from the Book of Mormon, but they have a lot of good things in there, So you can pull great stuff from all readings. I've looked at Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Jain, like they have such good things, and you can kind of extrapolate them and make your own religion and make your own spirituality, So I do think that it's important for every man and every human to have some deeper interconnectedness. And it's kind of interesting too. I have a good friend, Dan Coe. He wrote that book. And he's a really, really interesting kid. He's only like 20 something and great mind. But he was talking about one time, our desire to be on social media kind of tells us, it's our way of being into that interconnected collective consciousness. And we always look at it as a bad way, but I think that's true. I think we do love to be a part of social media because it does let us tap in to the collective consciousness. We get to be a part of other people. And I'm like, oh, that's a cool way to look at it. And I think it's true. We always have a desire to be in something bigger than ourselves.
I love that. Yeah. And I think regardless of whether it's a particular religion, whether it's the universe, whether it's the source, whether it's chi, whether it's, the force, whether it's nature, you can call it all sorts of things. But as you said, it is believing in something other than yourself, where we are all connected with that interconnected consciousness. I think that's what gives it power. So regardless of what you call it, it helps. So let's do more of it.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And it's important, I do think most people will find that if they completely cut that aspect out, that, they feel kind of empty. And I always wondered how really well-renowned physicians and scientists sometimes will have this more spiritual side of them. And when I was younger, immature and ignorant, I would, wonder like, how the heck do they do that? They're scientists, things are black and white. It's either this or not, there's none of this gray stuff. And I like, as I age, I'm like, oh yeah, this completely makes sense that you can have both. I had a great biology teacher when I was, I think, a freshman in high school. He was a really good mentor to me, but I definitely remember somebody like raised their hand and said like, do you believe in creation or evolution? He said, why not both? I was like, yeah, exactly. Really cool. Like both they don't have to be two separate things. They can merge. Science and religion and spirituality can definitely be intertwined.
Definitely. And I like that answer as well. Sometimes people are looking for an either or, when sometimes have both. That's fine.
Oh, I mean, I think everything is that way, everything that we've talked about too, there's always gray. Nothing is black and white, though we love the black and white. And that again is part of our huge issue as a society, especially recently with all of our groups and our camps. Everybody wants like to be in one, but the truth is always in the gray, it's always in the middle, whether it could be TRT or anything, it's things are not black and white. TRT is not good or bad, doses don't need to be sky high or super low. Like there's so much gray in everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Problem nowadays as well is that doesn't sell as a soundbite, does it? You've got to go for one or the other. Otherwise, in the middle, people are like, well, that doesn't, 5 seconds have gone by and I don't know the answer. And it's like, that's because it's complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. The entire social media game, though, I do like that aspect that Dan brought up, that it is kind of an interconnectedness, is also really screwed up. And I was talking to another friend this morning about growing, and he's finally kind of hacked into the algorithm. Same as Dr. Joey Muniz, and he gives a lot of good nutritional advice, but he kind of had to start taking on the like Lane Norton approach of calling people out and kind of bashing people. Like, let me bash Gary Brecka, instead of just telling, a nice neutral story about, oh, Gary might be wrong in these areas. You can't do that. You've got to call people out, because otherwise nobody cares. They want to see some drama, and it's kind of sad. I hate it.
Yeah, true. So people have been watching. And they go, I've got to talk to Adam. How do they find you? Is it on YouTube? Is it on your website? Where do people go?
Yeah, definitely. I think my YouTube probably has the most information. That's where I'm posting the most frequently right now. So the YouTube is just Dr. Adam Hotchkiss. Just copy and paste my name in, and maybe I'll be in the description below. And then Instagram obviously is easier to connect via DM and things, and that is essentially the same thing, at Dr. A.E. Hotchkiss. So they can find me either one of those places. And then, if they're in the US, they can come into Merrick Health and work with us there.
Yeah, I'll just say that Adam's YouTube channel is very good. The quality of the videos is insane. I don't know how you cut and edit everything. It looks really good. Excellent stuff.
That, goes back to that doing everything 110%. Like the moment I decided I wanted to have a YouTube channel, I spent endless hours just reading and watching how to film and how to edit. And it's great because I'm really a stickler for quality, for sure. It's becoming hard, though, for sure, to be able to juggle everything. I just posted a video today where I simply turned on the camera and worked out for an hour. It's been working for Sam Sulik, and I'm like, hey, hopefully people want to come along with me and just listen to me grunt and everything. We'll see. I'm sure it won't do well at all, but I'm hoping, because I'm like, oh, I need a break from all this insane editing and everything that I'm doing. It takes me like 8 hours to edit a video.
Yeah, the quality comes out nicely, mind. It's really impressive. It's you've gradually got sort of more and more sort of how sublime at doing it as well. You can tell from the videos, because I went back to the beginning, and the quality just keeps on getting better. It's impressive work.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And I love what you guys are doing too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for your time, both of you. It's been a brilliant conversation. We've covered all sorts of topics. Hopefully lots of cool stuff for the people who are listening. And I'll speak to you very soon. Have a great day.
See you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Alphagenix Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss next week's episode. For more resources on Alphagenix and men's health, visit alphagenix.co.uk. Until next time.